Hello, everybody. This is Linda Conroy with Moonwise Herbs, and this is the last of the live streaming that I'm doing this weekend with the Wisconsin Garden and Landscape Landscape Expo. Sorry, that's a mouthful. And I am planning to talk to you a little bit about herbs for promoting immune health and for relieving stress. So we talked about that a little bit earlier in the weekend, but we're going to talk about it again. And as I said, I'm with Moonwise Herbs. So if you don't know me, I'm an herbalist located in southern Wisconsin, just south of Madison, Wisconsin. I'm a bioregional herbalist, folk herbalist, wise woman herbalist, and so I can wear all of those hats. And I've been a practicing herbalist for 25 years. I offer educational programs, classes, and workshops. And then I make small batch herbal products. You can see in the background here, I have my little shop. We're here on my homestead in my studio slash classroom space, which is where I offer a lot of workshops and classes and meet with my apprentice students, and then also have my wares available if you're looking for those. So, in addition, I do consultations as well as part of my work. And then I also do community organizing. So I am the founder of and I run the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference with a group of other women. We run it as an organizing team, which is really wonderful because we get a lot of diversity and a lot of different input and different perspectives to put on that event. So I'll put that link to the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference in the chat as well. Hello, hey Maggie, good to see you here. Thanks for stopping in. So glad to see you. And so let's see. I'm like I said, I have my business Moonwise Herbs, run the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference, and so you can check those things out. As part of the weekend for the Garden Expo, I'm offering a special on my products if you order them on my website. And if you put in the code SAVE50 ship, we'll ship anything on $50 or over free of charge. It's usually $100, but for the expo, we're offering for the next week $50 worth of merchandise will ship for free. So I'll put that in there as well. And then we'll dive into our topic here, which is going to be herbs for reducing stress and also for immune health. So let's see. I'm going to just put in the code. So ship 50 Expo is the code. It wasn't working, but it is now. So if you tried and it wasn't working, it has been corrected and it is working. So that's great. So if you are here and you want to just pop in and say hello, that's great. It's good to know who's here. And as I start talking, if you have any questions, you want to ask something or you want to give some input along the way, that's great too. So I've been doing a lot of presentations this year, not surprisingly, on reducing stress, utilizing herbs, as well as boosting the immune system. And honestly, those two things really seem to go hand in hand as we're dealing with this virus that is COVID, and it's really wreaking a lot of havoc on our bodies and our immune system, but it's also causing a lot of stress, both physiologically as well as emotionally and spiritually. So, hey Jana, you're back. Yes, you made oat straw and mullein infusion since this morning. That's great, wonderful. So drinking oat straw is so great. We talked about that this morning. We were talking about nourishing herbal infusions. And oat straw is one I really emphasized and talked a lot about as being one that's nourishing and basically what I call fortifying to the nervous system. So just really strengthening our nervous system, both our overall nervous system, and then our gut has its own nervous system. It's called the entropic nervous system. And that nervous system it has a direct impact on the relationship with our gut and our brain and how that interfaces. So that can really help, oftentimes, even reduce anxiety. Um, Building gut health helps a lot with anxiety and stress as well. So there's a lot of different ways we can go about nourishing our nervous system and keeping our system strong so that we can reduce stress. And drinking oat straw infusions is absolutely a great way to do that. And if you're not familiar with making nourishing herbal infusions, you can hop on my website and learn to do that. I'm not going to go over that in depth right now because we spent a whole hour on it this morning. And I love, Tiana, that you went away and made nourishing herbal infusions as a result of that visit. So the other one that she made is mullein, and mullein is a respiratory herb. It's strengthening and tonifying to the respiratory system, to the lungs. And so drinking mullein in the past year has been something that I've been really emphasizing. I've always emphasized that in the fall with people and with myself for drinking, starting to drink that when cold and flu season starts to occur. And so drinking that as a strengthener so that our lungs can rebound more easily or fight off any disease that we might be exposed to. And so combining that, so drinking that infusion, and then the other thing I've been actually really focusing on bringing into my life on a daily basis over the past year has been elderberry. So you can bring that into your life in many different ways. I actually make a syrup. It's a called an oxymol. It's a kind of an old time syrup, mixing honey and vinegar together with elderberries, fresh elderberries, letting them steep for 4 to 6 weeks, and then ingesting that on a daily basis as a viral fighting and immune boosting tonic. And then along with that, I do the same thing with a root called elecampane, which is specifically an antibiotic for the respiratory system. And if you're interested in herbal antibiotics, so that's a whole wide topic. There's a book called Herbal Antibiotics by an herbalist named Stephen Buhner. I highly recommend that you consider reading that book if you're interested in the topic of herbal antibiotics. And he also wrote a book called Herbal Antivirals, which is a really good book as well. And it can help you understand how viruses work because I think that's been something that's been a little daunting in the past year is trying to sort out like how exactly do viruses work and how do they work differently than bacterial infections, which is they do act very differently. Although a viral infection can lead to a bacterial infection. So not so much the other way around, but the viral infection can. So with COVID, for example, it can create inflammation in the lungs, and then you can start to build up some fluid and possibly develop an infection in the lungs. So elecampane is really good at supporting the lungs and helping to either, treat that or prevent it. Um, of course, if you actually have a lung infection, you really want to call your practitioner and talk to them and not try to deal with that exclusively on your own. But if you feel like something's happening, taking the herb isn't going to hurt at the same time as you contact your physician. Because, when you start to develop something that's more severe, it's always good to talk to your physician and get input. I mean, taking elecampane syrup is like taking a cough syrup if you were to go buy it at the drugstore. So that's fine. It's something you can just buy over the counter. But if you develop something more severe, obviously, go and get some input from someone. So, elecampane and mullein for the lungs, for the respiratory system, elderberry for building immunity, building immune health, and also it's an antiviral, so potentially reducing our potential for contracting a virus or for reducing the viral load. That's something a lot of people haven't been paying attention to. I mean, some people have, but the general public, not so much. Is keeping the viral load low, because if we have a really high viral load, then and the virus is replicating really quickly, then we're more likely to go into a more severe disease state. So ingesting herbs that are antiviral, like elderberry, actually, lemon balm or Melissa is also antiviral, so you can drink a tea of that, which is really pleasant. It's lemony if you like lemon. So there's no downside to drinking that. And then St. John's wort as well is antiviral. So there are herbs that have a capacity to fight off or ward off viruses. Now, of course, our first line is to build and strengthen our immune system. So, like I said, drinking nourishing herbal infusions, eating really well, of course, getting lots of sleep and rest. So, I often, when I do consultations, I'll say to people, so, have you ever worked with an herbalist before? And most people say they haven't. And what I'll say to people is that there's a three-pronged approach. We usually are working with lifestyle changes, diet, and herbs. And so looking at all of those factors. And then, sometimes community, um, sometimes spiritual work, and certainly it's always a good idea to have, when I'm working with people, to have people go out and get some support for some of those other things out in the community, and not just be reliant on one person for all of your needs, because there's certainly um, a benefit to having community around you as you're healing or promoting your health. So, looking at all the different things we can do herbally and bring in the nourishing herbal infusions, tinctures, so we can have herbal tinctures on hand that can be really helpful for our immune system. And then also dealing with stress. I think that's really been one of the biggest factors this year as I've been working with people, is all the stress that we've been under, the unprecedented stress. And oat straw infusions is one of my mainstays for really helping with that. And then the other is a category of herbs called adaptogens. And adaptogens literally help our bodies adapt to stress and help our bodies be more flexible, adaptable, and resilient, which is what we really need. We really need our bodies to be able to go through this, not ignore the fact that we're stressed, not ignore that we might be sad and grieving and all of these things, but just helping our bodies move through those things with some flexibility so that we don't get mired down in that, because that can be really daunting. The other thing is, if you get mired down and you're feeling less energetic, you can bring some herbs in that can help and give you some more energy. Like nettle infusion can be really helpful for that, for providing some energy. And also eating seaweed. I'm a big fan of seaweed. It's super mineral rich. And I think we underestimate the lack of nutrition in our bodies, and how that when we don't have really good nutrients and an abundance of good nutrients in our bodies, that our bodies can really be stressed from that. So, I'm not here to criticize anyone's diet by any means, but it's just good to get a nice array and diversity of food into your diet. So I like to eat a lot of fermented foods, and sauerkraut is always nice. I put sauerkraut pretty much on my plate every single meal, and I often make sauerkraut and add herbs to it. So that's a nice benefit. And helping our gut and building our microbiome is really important in terms of reducing stress and building our immune system. Our immune system, the gut is the heart of our immune system, really, in so many ways. So not only having probiotics like yogurt and sauerkraut, real lacto fermented sauerkraut, etc., but also yogurt, and then also looking at prebiotics. So bringing prebiotics into our diets, like roots have a prebiotic in them called Inulin. So any root, lots of garlic, lots of onions, and then herbally burdock and dandelion. Actually, I just brought these just to show you. Any of you who know me know that I make burdock pickles every year. So these are this year, one of the jars from this year's batch. And if you look on the bottom, it has a white substance here. And that is actually a substance called inulin. And inulin is a prebiotic that feeds the probiotics, basically potentiating them, making the probiotics more active and having them replicate more easily because they've got food. So there are a bunch of different prebiotic substances we can bring into our diet, including inulin. There's also substances in mushrooms that can do that. And so, ingesting mushrooms on a regular basis. Anybody who's been around me lately knows that one of my new mottos is a mushroom a meal instead of an apple a day, a mushroom a meal. So having something with mushrooms in every single meal. And I know that could sound daunting, but it can be really easy. I teach classes on how to cook with mushrooms because a lot of times the Western diet doesn't include a lot of mushrooms. And it's easy to bring them in. We can put them in soups and stews and eggs and we can add them in so many places, and that's going to help our gut health. It's going to boost our immunity. And, in other cultures, they're utilizing mushrooms right alongside with conventional treatments. Like in Asia, it's very common for conventional practitioners to suggest chemotherapy and or radiation, and then also be recommending that people ingest mushrooms. So that's pretty interesting in terms of looking at the acknowledgement that mushrooms are really strengthening and supportive to immune health and not contraindicated in that situation. A lot of conventional practitioners here in the United States, I'm not assuming everyone is at the Garden Expo is from the United States, but that um, that that other cultures are utilizing mushrooms. Here in the US, not so much. We're kind of, even herbalists have been slow to start incorporating mushrooms into their work. It's starting to happen more and more. And I'm a big fan. I utilize vinegar infused mushrooms. I utilize mushroom tinctures. I cook with mushrooms like crazy and I put them in my stocks and stews. I make teas and infusions with mushrooms. Um, Here, mushroom powders have made it. Let's see. Super easy to add to baking and sauces. Yes, it's true. The only thing I always caution people about powders in terms of herbs or mushrooms is if you buy your powders, you don't know how long they've been around. That's always kind of my hesitation with them. So I do powder mushrooms, but I tend to powder them myself after they're whole. I harvest and dry most of my own mushrooms, so I get them whole and then I throw the mushrooms in my Vitamix and I'll powder it myself right before I'm going to use it. I usually don't like to store herbs or mushrooms powdered because every time you break something down, you lose some nutrition along the way. So that's just something to be thoughtful about. Um, and so, even though, some people may be doing it themselves, and that's great. Kimberly, that looks like you're doing that. But there also are a lot of powders for sale that, I personally would not purchase. So mushrooms are just so amazing in terms of how nourishing they are to the body. They really are as I'm learning more and more about them, they're kind of the quintessential let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. I really have such an admiration for them. And not only are they incredible for our immune system and for our health, but they're amazingly important to the ecosystem and to the earth. And so having a relationship with mushrooms starts to teach us that mushrooms are in every ecosystem and contribute to the health of the soil, the health of the other plants around them. They have a symbiotic relationships with trees. And so it's really incredible to see how they can promote our health and the health of the planet. So developing a relationship with them is incredible. And just so that you all know, in case you just popped in and you're haven't been here uh, earlier in the weekend or earlier today, as I started this live stream, my name is Linda Conroy. My business is Moonwise Herbs, and I'm a 25-year veteran herbalist, teaching classes and workshops and working in bioregionally, although I have moved regions a couple times, so that's always interesting when you're a bioregional herbalist and you change regions. You often incorporate new things in, which is always exciting. And I am a community organizer. I am the founder of, and I am one of the organizers for the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference, which will be happening May 7th, 8th, and 9th this year. And because we're offering that conference virtually, we have instructors from all over the world. We have an instructor from Finland, England, New Zealand, India. Super exciting that we're able to bring so many people together, women together. And even though, we are like this event, which I have been doing for about 12 years attending as a vendor and a presenter. Um, at the Wisconsin, Garden and Landscape Expo, which is what I'm representing here. Um, we're not meeting in person, and there are benefits to that. I'm sure some of you are from other places, or even if you are from Wisconsin or the Midwest, you haven't been to the Garden Expo. So this is a nice way to get exposed and to visit. But there's always that piece missing of not seeing each other in person. So we'll hope for that for next year. But the benefit of virtual is that we get to be with people maybe we normally wouldn't. So that's with the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference this year. We're really able to bring in instructors that we wouldn't normally be able to spend time with and have really deep, rich conversations with them about health and healing that has an international vantage point, which is super exciting. So under the umbrella of the Midwest Women's Herbal, and one of the reasons I launched into this right now is that as we were talking about mushrooms, it got me thinking about another event that the Midwest Women's Herbal hosts in the fall is a mushroom event called Mycelium Mysteries. And if you don't know what mycelium is, it's the underground network, basically, quote unquote, kind of the root system of the mushroom. What we see above ground are the fruiting bodies, and then there's this whole network called mycelium and hypha underneath the earth that is actually the actual mushroom. And so it's really amazing. We have this event that's going into its fifth year where we go into the woods and we learn about mushrooms, mushroom identification. We learn tree identification so we can more easily learn about that symbiotic relationship and how to find and identify mushrooms. We learn to cook with them, utilize them for medicine, and relate to them and learn about how they affect the ecosystem. It's super dynamic and fun and amazing to be with women in that realm. And then it's called Mycelium Mysteries. So also the mysteries that come with the darkness and the fear of mushrooms and that they're decayers. And we talk about death and dying in that space as well, because there's a lot of that happening with mushrooms. And so it's super dynamic. So if you get a chance to check that out, we are envisioning holding that in the woods next fall. So keep your eyes out on the Women's Herbal Conference website for that. And we also do have a lot of recordings of mushroom classes and workshops on our website that will teach about mushroom, all the things I talked about, mushroom ID, cooking, medicine making. I know there was a workshop in the fall on astrology and mushrooms and how that intertwines. And so just some really fascinating, interesting things you might not think of. Tiana is saying a gorgeous chicken of the woods mushroom suddenly showed up late last summer behind her house. Oh, nice. That's always such a delight to find that mushroom in particular, right? It's sulfur shelf is the other name for it. That mushroom is kind of orange, which is looks like sulfur. And It's definitely a choice mushroom. Some people say it tastes like chicken, and I would concur that you could fool someone and put it in a stir fry. And it's one definitely all mushrooms have immune boosting qualities. They have adaptogenic qualities. So bringing mushrooms into your life and your diet on a regular basis can be so nice. And it's interesting because I've had a lot of people say, "Well, I don't like mushrooms," and um, it's usually they have only had either canned mushrooms or they weren't cooked very well or they just ate mushrooms off of a salad bar. And I'm here to tell you that there's a lot more to mushrooms than that, surface level uh, culinary experience because they can be deep fried, they can be made into a really nice savory pate. I mean, there's just so many things. We can make a tea with them. So there's lots of ways to incorporate mushrooms into our lives. And we were talking earlier about powdering them, and I've utilized the powder for many things. And one of them, I made these really incredible crackers where I use the mushroom powder as a little bit of the flour in the crackers, and that was quite delicious. Use it as a thickener, the powdered mushrooms, in soups and stews. And people, like if you're trying to get someone to eat mushrooms who is hesitant, putting the mushrooms in that way is a great way to not hide, I don't like to hide food, but disguise it a little bit. So hopefully they will get a little more friendly to mushrooms. I do that with seaweed too. I used to live in the Pacific Northwest and harvested a lot of my own seaweed, and I'm not giving it up. I still eat seaweed on a regular basis. And um, that getting that into people's diet can be tricky because in the Western diet, we don't normally cook on a regular basis with seaweed. But the type of seaweed that I'm ingesting, which is Nereocystis lutecanna is the botanical name, or bullwhip or giant kelp, and that seaweed is easy to crumble into food. So getting it, again, like you can put mushrooms and seaweed in your eggs and your soups and your stews. There's so many ways to incorporate it. And then I also make a condiment called gamascio, which is toasted sesame seeds and toasted herbs. So you can toast all of the herbs that you're working with the sesame seeds and then sprinkle it on your food. Excuse me. I actually have a recipe on my blog, and I have a bunch of recipes on my blog. So if you want to go and visit, I have articles and recipes there. You can go and find that recipe for gamascio. You can find the instructions for the nourishing herbal infusions and a list of the infusions I like to ingest on my blog so that we'll give you some instruction if you're interested in incorporating these things into your diet and your life. And it's interesting because I think so many times when we think about herbs and herbalism, we think, oh, we're going to take an herb and we're going to utilize it just like a drug and we're going to treat disease. Now, sometimes herbs can work that way, uh, but generally not. Generally, herbs have a different pathway, so to speak, of how they affect your body. So, for example, echinacea, if we take echinacea, which is a great immune tonic, immune booster, and it also can have an effect on, health issues. The way it works is it actually stimulates your own immunity. It stimulates your blood cells to start um, healing, to start scavenging and create a healing process. So it's important to know that with echinacea, for example, you need to take it really regularly to get the benefit from it. So say you take it once and then you just, go to bed and you don't take it ever again. It's not going to do anything. You really need it in your system ongoing to get the benefit from it. So if I'm really trying to work with an herb like echinacea and I'm trying to deal with something that's happening, or boost my immune system for some reason, I'm going to take that herb every 2 hours, either as a tea or I'll take it in a tincture form, but I'm going to take it really regularly for a while to get the benefit from it. I'm not going to get benefit if I just take it once. and take it in small quantities, because also taking it in a decent quantity is important as well. Do canned mushrooms have any nutritional value? I would say yes. And the reason I'm saying that, because canning food does denature it, which means it loses a lot of vitamins, especially. But it's really hard to get rid of minerals. Minerals actually, if you were to char something or roast something, minerals get more concentrated. Minerals, you can think of minerals almost like rocks, because that's what minerals are. Of course, in our food, minerals aren't rock-like, but I'm just trying to make an analogy so you can understand what I'm saying. Is that minerals concentrate, and the more you cook them, the more you break things down, the more minerals will be bioavailable. So I wouldn't not eat canned mushrooms, and I wouldn't think if I ate them that I wouldn't get any benefit. But for example, you probably won't get one of the major benefits of mushrooms and factors that is important to talk about here. So thanks for asking the question and stimulating my thinking in this direction, is that mushrooms are chock full of vitamin D, some more than others, but generally speaking, they actually take sunlight just like we do and convert sunlight into vitamin D in their bodies. So they take it on the outside and they convert it just like we do. So vitamin D is one of the most important vitamins that mushrooms offer us. And vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin. So cooking your mushrooms in lots of good butter, like good fats, always say it's a good excuse to eat a lot of butter. It's going to make that vitamin D more bioavailable to the body. You need to ingest it with fat. So you won't get that from a canned mushroom. You're definitely going to lose vitamins like vitamin D. So eat mushrooms in general. Um, if you can eat fresh mushrooms, or other interesting thing about mushrooms is that when you dry them, they don't lose their nutritional value. So you can dry them and rehydrate them and cook them, and then you're going to still get that vitamin D content. It's just that the canning denatures vitamins, and that certainly is problematic in our food supply in general. That if people are eating a lot of canned foods, even if it's organic, I always think that's really interesting to go into the health food store and see how many processed foods are there. I tend not to eat processed foods mostly. I mean, if I go to someone's house and they serve it to me, I'm more than happy to eat it because I like being fed and cared for in that way. But it was not something I would eat on a regular basis in my home. So like I said, I think you're going to get minerals, but if you could bring other mushrooms in, that would be helpful as well. So Danielle, hopefully that was helpful to think about. Let's see. Kimberly is saying, I make pretzels almost daily with mushroom, maitake, bolete, or chanterelle. Nice. And nettle powder. Today I made maitake stroganoff, yes, and yesterday was chicken with fillets of pecan. Great, Drew. Lots of mushrooms. And see, that's the thing, is just bringing them in all these different creative ways. I know I like to pickle mushrooms. I got this old Russian pickling recipe, and that's really fun because then I can just grab a couple pickled mushrooms, or I can put them on something I'm eating as a garnish or condiment. And so, yeah, just bring them in on a regular basis. I know I love shiitake mushrooms in that they're very savory, so they add nice flavor to whatever you're putting them in. I make a shiitake infused vinegar that I like to add to things because it has this great umami flavor. So, so yeah, just bringing mushrooms in, like I said, in every way you can. I make mushroom French fries, so I take really meaty mushrooms and deep fry them. And that's really a nice way to get people who are adverse to eat them, because if you can get them really crisp, put a little bit of marinara sauce on them, um, that often can lend people that can be really friendly. And then the other thing is lion's mane mushroom is one that I cook with a fair amount, and that actually has the texture of crab meat. So you can make things like mock crab cakes with it, and any crab like a dip and a spread. So there's all kinds of ways we can incorporate mushrooms into our diet. Let's see. So Kimberly is asking about echinacea plant. What is the best part for tincturing? So that is a very interesting question. And I think if you asked somebody that question maybe 30 years ago, they would have told you the root. And today the answer is significantly different, and it's different for some interesting reasons. In that, in the organization, the United Plant Savers was set up to protect medicinal plants. And one of their first plants that they set out to protect was echinacea, because echinacea is a prairie plant. And so echinacea grows, naturally in prairies. And we have about, it's estimated 2% of our naturally occurring prairies. I know people are planting prairies back, but we have like 2% of our naturally occurring prairies left in this country, in the US. So there was there were people wildcrafting echinacea root to make medicine. And so United Plant Savers went on a campaign to discourage people from doing that. And they were very successful in that. And so people started growing it because it's actually really easy to grow. Just need a sunny place and it pretty much takes off. People grow it outside their doorstep. People grow it on their front lawns and their garden beds. It's really an easy herb. It's very friendly. So what happened at that time is when they started looking at this, there was some research done on the cone in the flower, the center part of the flower. And so, it's in the Asteraceae family. So the Asteraceae plants have a disc flower in the middle and often have this combination of ray flowers and disc flowers together. So it's the disc. When we think of the sunflowers in that family, it has the seeds in the middle, the flowers basically that turn to seed we're most familiar with in sunflowers, and then the ray flowers. So echinacea has that as well. And so they did some research and found that there was plenty of medicine in that cone that you could prepare for either a tea or a tincture. So you can utilize either and or both. Often commercial preparations have both the cone and the root in it these days. And you will not find a wildcrafted echinacea preparation on the commercial market at all anymore. Thank goodness. Hail to United Plant Savers for taking on that campaign and making that transition and making that happen. That's a really positive environmental story to tell about herbal medicine because thinking about herbal medicine, we forget to think about sustainability, and we need to because if we're wildcrafting herbs, and at the rate that the interest of in herbalism is going, which is escalated this past year, it already was growing, and then with the pandemic, it's just escalated. We do want to be mindful. Where are the herbs coming from? What part of the plant is being harvested? So for your own personal use, if you have a small bed of echinacea and you really don't want to dig up the roots or you don't want to dig up all of the root, um, you can certainly utilize the cone for your medicine. And you want to do it, unfortunately, with flowers. You want to harvest flowers when they're at the height of their potency and the bees are on them or the butterflies are on them. So they know when the plant is at the height of its potency because that's when they want to pollinate it. That's when you want to harvest it. And it's often hard for us to harvest things when they're at the height of the flowers, when they're at the height of their potency, because we're enjoying them then. But that is the time when the medicine is going to be the most potent. Um, so hopefully, Kimberly, that answered your question. It probably gave you way more information than you were looking for. But it's such a fascinating story that I think we need to know that story and know um, uh, the history of these plants and what our relationship has and is with them. So utilizing the cone, there's plenty of research to show that that's fine. And With echinacea, one of the things you can do is make your preparation and put a little bit of it on your tongue. And if you feel this tingle, you know you've captured the medicines because that is a compound in echinacea that you'll readily be able to experience and know that your preparation is strong and uh, nourishing. So, Kimberly, thank you. Happy to hear the full scoop. Sustainability and history are important, so important. And United Plant Savers is continually this organization. I highly recommend people visit their website. They are continually educating and teaching and researching and learning about the plants. They have a list of plants that are at risk and a list of plants that are endangered. And there are plants that are at risk of being endangered, and there are plants that are endangered. And one of the most popular plants in North America today for health, which is, in my opinion, utilized inappropriately a lot of times on the commercial market, is golden seal. And golden seal is an herb that can treat bacterial infections upon contact. It's not like echinacea where it boosts your immune system. It actually needs to come into contact with the infection. So it's nice for skin infections. You can make an eye wash if you have an eye infection. So, or if you have, a sore throat, you have strep throat, it's great for that kind of thing. But it's not great for systemic it's not a systemic antibiotic. It doesn't boost your own immunity. So utilizing it, some people combine it on the commercial market with echinacea, which is really a misguided formula, in my opinion. So utilizing it separately for its own reasons and echinacea for its own reasons. Now, because golden seal is endangered and it's very hard to propagate, unlike echinacea, because echinacea grows in sunny places, it likes fields and gardens. Golden seal is an understory plant. It likes, shady places. It doesn't like overly sunny places. So it's harder to propagate. You can't propagate it in a field and cultivate it and grow it as a monocrop the way that we can actually do that with echinacea. So golden seal is still being wildcrafted, and there are not a lot of wild stands of it in places where it used to be prolific, and you hear that report from herbalists over and over again. So United Plant Savers is working really hard on that plant and working with people to look at how we can cultivate it in understory situations. Um, but the other thing we can do is actually look for what we call analogues. And there are basically analog means a substitute, something that might have similar actions or similar results. And so the one of the most active compounds in golden seal is berberine. And there are other berberine containing plants that we can utilize. There are quite a few actually. And in my region, southern Wisconsin, and all over the Midwest, and certainly other places as well, there's a plant called barberry, and that plant has berberine in it. So we can utilize that plant um, in many instances as an analog or replacement to golden seal. And that plant is considered super invasive. If you call a farmer in my region and say, hey, can I go into your woods and dig up some of your barberry? They're like, sure, please do me a favor. Come on out and do that. Or I've had people call me and say, hey, I pulled all this barberry out. Do you want it? And I'm always like, yes, I do, because it's the root that we utilize for medicine. And um, that's very hard to, it's very difficult to dig up because it gets very well established. So it's interesting to see that a lot of the herbs on the at-risk or endangered list for United Plant Savers are herbs that we utilize the roots of. And so when you utilize a root, of course, you disturb the plant and you're digging it up, and then you usually are killing it. So these are things to be really mindful of as we really don't want to make the same mistakes that a lot of other realms have made in over harvesting and mistreating the land, etc., as we're trying to heal. And honestly, one of my herbal teachers, who was an older gentleman, he's one of our elders, he says 95% of the herbs that we use are to compensate for lifestyle changes we're not willing to make. So, getting enough rest, just making sure that we're not overutilizing resources and these things, like we have disease states that result from those things, and then we try to heal it with herbs, and it can be, really misguided. So that's why I like to focus a lot on the fortifying, strengthening foods, herbs that nourish us, and then bring these other herbs in as needed in small quantities, not overutilizing them and not over foraging or not over harvesting, especially if we're doing any wild harvesting or wild crafting. So those are definitely things to think about. So I'm here for about 15 more minutes, just for anybody who has just come in or hasn't been here all along. I am Linda Conroy with Moonwise Herbs. It's my small herbal business that I have been running for, gosh, over 20 years. And I've been a practicing herbalist for 25 years. My business kind of, we say it kind of happened organically. I run classes and workshops and apprenticeship programs, both online and in person. And I make small batch herbal products. I grow and wild harvest the vast majority of the herbs that I utilize in my products, and I'm here live streaming as part of the Wisconsin Garden and Landscape Expo, which I usually every February do then live. And since they're not holding it live, they orchestrated this vendor basically marketplace and opened it up for 2 hours every day. I was here at noon. I'm here now from 6 to 7 Central Time. And so it's a great way to connect and just share some information. I thought we would spend the hour talking about herbs and healing rather than me just going through my products. But just know I sell a fair amount of things that I'm talking about. And so if you don't grow them yet, because maybe you will, or you don't harvest them yet, this is a good time to start planning for that. You can go hop onto my website. And like I said, I'm offering free shipping for orders over $50. Normally it's over $100, but as part of the expo, it's going to be for over 50. And the code is in the chat if you want to take a look at that. And you can go ahead and place any orders that you want on my website, which is also in the chat, moonwiseherbs.com. I'm also the founder and organizer for the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference, and that's going to be happening May 7th, 8th, and 9th, with also prior to that some pre-conference deep dive immersions in different topics. And so you can visit midwestwomensherbal.com to learn about that. And next weekend on Saturday, I'm actually doing a workshop on stirring the cauldron herbs for vitality. It's a 3-hour deep dive workshop into how to bring herbs in for vitality. And that's through the Midwest Women's Herbal Women's Wellness Series. So you can take a look at that on that website as well. And so, yeah, so I just wanted to mention those things. And let's see what questions. So Danielle is asking a question. Are there any antiviral herbs that can be harmful to healthy gut bacteria? So not antivirals. So elderberry, no. St. John's wort, no. Lemon balm, no. Um, no, I can't think of any off the top of my head. I don't want to say absolutely no, but the ones that are going to be more challenging to gut bacteria are going to be the herbs that kill bacteria on contact. So, for example, Goldenseal, that can be disruptive to your gut flora, and so could then barberry if you're ingesting it, or Oregon grape is also high in berberine. And so those herbs, so more of the antibacterial herbs would be problematic for your gut health and your gut flora. So, more similar to antibiotics because those herbs have some antibiotic-like qualities. So that's something to think about. I don't utilize those herbs internally a whole lot. I actually more utilize them topically. So that's interesting to think about. But now that I can think of off the top of my head with antivirals, that like I said, I don't like to, I don't want to say never, but um, I can't think of any. So hopefully that answers your question. And really, if you want to think it through, it's not, again, it's not going to be the antiviral action that's going to be problematic. What would be problematic would be something that would disrupt your gut flora or be, really hard on the gut for some reason. So you can think it through, and that's usually what I do in that scenario. If I'm looking at, I'm going to bring this in, I want to build somebody's gut flora. Like, is there going to be any kind of conflict here? I think that's where herbalists really it behooves us to develop some uh, critical thinking skills and learn the actions of the plants, not just learn the plant. Okay, this is antiviral, but how is it antiviral? How does it work? Like with echinacea, boosting our own immunity. Echinacea is not an antibiotic herb in the way that an antibiotic is in terms of being disruptive to the gut flora. Echinacea is not going to be disruptive to the gut flora because what it does is it stimulates your own immunity. Excuse me, which is really different than what I'm saying about Goldenseal, which actually does kill bacteria on contact. So if you're taking a lot of that, especially if you were to drink a tea of it or take a lot of tincture, that could really disrupt your gut flora. So hopefully, Danielle, that gives you some food for thought and some ideas of how to think that through because there's first of all there's always some exception, which is why I would be hesitant to say absolutely not, but that's a way to think that through and think about it, like what are the qualities and the actions of the plants. That's really different than just knowing this plant has this action, but getting familiar with a plant, which is why I'm a big fan of developing relationships with plants by sipping them, by ingesting them, by knowing how they feel in the body, by sitting with them, by planting them, by growing them. Then we really get to know them well and what their qualities are and how they will and won't interface with our bodies. They're very dynamic. When herbs meet our body, they have a very dynamic experience. It's symbiotic. Our bodies and plants have co-evolved together. It's very different than drugs. There's a lot more, nourishment and fortifying and building that goes on with herbs. And sometimes some nuances, like when we're working with herbs for the nervous system and nourishing the nervous system can be very sensitive, especially if if we've been stressed. And so even small quantities of a nervine, an herb that affects the nervous system, can have an impact very easily. And, oftentimes a positive impact. Although there are sometimes nervines like valerian, for example, that there has been some research done that that herb will stimulate 25% of the people who take it, not calm them down. So you want to make sure you don't fit into that category. And I always say to people, if you really want to take valerian, take it when you don't need the sleep to make sure you're not one of those people. Um, and there are lots of other options for, helping with calming and easing and soothing the nervous system if we're dealing with, stress or anxiety or things like that. Simple first and foremost, chamomile is great. I did one of the sharings I did earlier this weekend. I talked extensively about chamomile. Um, and that's an amazing, simple herb, gentle, doesn't really have any downside to it. Tiana's asking about CBD oil extract interfere or work well with most herbals. Um, let's to say does it work well with most herbals is way too generic. I can't really say yes or no to that question. But what I can say is that we want to be aware of the person, first of all, because one of the things I hear a lot from people with CBD is for some people it's really effective and they get great benefit, and some people either get no benefit or they feel like there are downsides to it. So It's not, CBD is not a benign substance. It's definitely not a nourishing herb. It's definitely a more drug-like herb, so it has an impact. And for some people, it's really calming and relaxing to them. Personally, I've had experiences where I've ingested CBD oil and had a very relaxing experience physiologically. It didn't affect me cognitively, and it only happened once, and then I took it again and nothing. So it really varies. It also varies on the preparation, the potency of the plant. We're really, the amount of products that are being produced, CBD products, some of them, are better than others. And it's sometimes hard to tease that out. And of course, we can produce some of our own products, which is, depending on where you live and what what you're able to do. So does it work okay with most herbs? That's, like I said, that's too broad of a question. It can work well in harmony, just like any herb can work well with some herbs and sometimes not. I'm not a big fan of inundating the body with too many herbs at one time. I think it really is a good idea to try one at a time, do what we call simpling. So, if CBD really helps you and it feels like it's effective and you've been taking it for a little bit and you're like, yep, I know this herb feels good in my body, it's working. And then you want to introduce other herbs, then introduce them one at a time and go, okay, I'm taking CBD and here I'm also drinking oat straw infusion. And wow, these really work nicely together for me. That could be really different for someone else. Someone else might go, I don't know. This doesn't it feels in conflict for me. Or, like my experience, I was like, okay, well, the CBT was, I must have needed something from it that one time, and that was it. It's more drug like. It's not like the nourishing herbal infusions are more food like, and you ingest them every single day. I really hesitate to think that we want to take drug like herbs every single day. And for me, CBD fits more into that category that I would utilize it for a specific reason for a certain amount of time, looking at what's the underlying concern here and how can we try to affect that. So it's a lot more about strategy than, hey, do these work well together? So, Tiana, I hope that answers your question. I really like to be able to think these things through and not just give a simple, pop off the cuff answer because that really isn't one. I mean, we need to be careful about that. It's too easy to pop on Facebook and have people tell us what we should and shouldn't take and what works and what doesn't work. And that's too black and white. It just really isn't that way. I'm actually trained as a social worker, and I find that knowing about people and knowing about herbs and being able to be an ambassador for those two things is really helpful in my consultation practice when I'm working with people. Not to just say, "Oh, here, this is what's popular, and here, take this." And CBD certainly fits into that. I'm not saying don't ever utilize it, but just utilizing it mindfully and for specific reasons is how I approach it. We do have a really great workshop that's going to be happening at the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference by a woman named Tammy Sweet, who wrote a really wonderful book on cannabis, and she's going to do some myth busting about cannabis. And I'm excited about that workshop because I think it's important to have an idea. And she's studied and researched and really has a deep knowledge about utilizing that plant, and her information is solid. So I'd encourage people to consider, if you're interested in that topic, to consider attending and or checking her out. Her name is Tammy Sweet. So we're getting toward the end of our time here. I just want to say again, I am Linda Conroy with Moonwise Herbs. My link to my website is in the chat, moonwiseherbs.com. I'm also the founder and I'm one of the organizers for the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference. We put on a spring conference, herbal conference, and this year it's virtual on May 7th, 8th, and 9th. And then we put on other events. You can see them. Women's Winter Wellness event is going on right now. You can still pop on and sign up for those workshops or the series and get recordings. Or there's still live workshops you can attend. We also do host Mycelium Mysteries, which is a women's mushroom retreat or conference in the upper Midwest. So if you are interested in those things, visit midwestwomensherbal.com. If you want to check out my website, moonwiseherbs.com, and get a discount of free shipping for anything $50 or over, you can go ahead and check that out. The code is in the chat. Again, you can, I don't remember exactly what it is right now, but you can find it in the chat, or you can find it on the Wisconsin Garden and Landscape Expo website. So they have a whole listing of all of my web information. So I hope this was helpful. I hope people enjoyed it. I know I enjoyed spending time with you all. Some of you I spent time with earlier today as well. And I really hope that you continue to nourish yourself. Take good care. These are really stressful times, and it's just really important that we take our time and take good care. And as things start to open up and we start to go out into the world more, try to do it thoughtfully so you don't overwhelm yourself, because this has been really tough times. And I think we can have a tendency to do that. So take really good care. And yeah, just say hello on social media going forward, and I hope to see you all in the future. Thanks, everybody.